All right. Thank you, everybody. First of all, just wanted to really express gratitude for having the opportunity to be here. Thank you, Martin, and thank you, CIFE, for giving me this speaking opportunity. So my name is Yen Ping. I'm the founder and CEO of GaiaMesh, which is we provide an AIoT lightweight building automation system. So you can think of it as like a completely wireless version of a Honeywell system or a Johnson control system that makes it really easy for asset owners to save a lot of energy in their operational assets. So before that, I was in Martin's PhD group, and my PhD research was actually, it's really good to see all these familiar faces. PhD research was got huge support from John Mully here. So thank you for that. Also, and then before that, I was working at Walt Disney Imagineering in BIM and IoT, leading their R&D group in the Shanghai lab. And then before that, I was actually working with Dr. Calvin Camp here in BIM consulting and research. So that's a bit of my background. I also did my undergrad and master's at Berkeley and MIT in architecture and building technology. To this guy? This talk was actually supposed to follow on Melody and Marlena's talk this morning around resiliency of global facilities. And I was really interested in Melody's big question of, what's the right level of investment that we should put into our facilities to make it, get the right sizing of resilient infrastructure, not to overinvest, but also to make sure our facilities operate in a very stable manner. And I think this is more and more a very prevalent question given all of the, the instability that's brought on because of climate change. So this has become kind of an extension of what we're doing at our startup as well, from energy efficiency moving towards resiliency. That's the main kind of title of the talk, is how do we right-size infrastructure? Actually, I chose the word reliability here. I'll talk a little bit more about it later, across operational facilities using really granular operating data. So here, I wanted to just, because we're trying to right-size infrastructure, we need to do a lot of calculations, and we need to apply predictive models and things like that. So we need to be very precise with our definitions and terms. So I ended up choosing reliability over words like resiliency and robustness. And often those different terms are kind of conflated with each other. And I just wanted to ask the audience, does anyone have a good way of differentiating those three terms? Does anyone want to volunteer to define those for me? Okay, I'll go ahead. So I'll go ahead with an example. I thought maybe there wouldn't be anybody. So my talk is late today because I was caught in Shanghai had the worst. I'm usually based in Shanghai, and then I had the worst typhoon in about 75 years. So that's why my flight arrived late. And I thought I could use that as an example for defining these different terms, just to get us started. So this is actually how to define reliability in the context of an operational facility from the perspective of some trees in Shanghai. So this is actually out my window yesterday when I realized I couldn't make my flight, and taking the video of all the typhoon outside. And the thing is, I was talking with my wife, and we were saying oh, we really, really like these trees, and because they provide privacy and shade, and we hope that they can make it through the typhoon. And how can you describe that in terms of the resilience and robustness and reliability, in terms of the service that they provide us in the apartment? And so actually, that was kind of an interesting analogy. So if you think about that tree in terms of how much force can that tree withstand before it snaps? That's robustness, right? How strong is it before it breaks? How quickly can that branch grow back and provide that shade again, right? So the recovery speed is really resilience. And then what percentage of the time will the tree provide proper shade and privacy for that apartment? That's really reliability. So reliability is what I chose at the end as the term to use for this talk. Is really represents kind of uptime, right? As a result, or it's a function of robustness and resilience. And the interesting thing is, we want our facilities to behave or to be stable, right? To be reliable, but that requires a significant amount of investment as more and more shocks perturb the system. So reliability requires resources, and we don't want to overinvest, both for our own kind of financial sustainability, but as also for the sake of being sustainable environmentally, right? We don't want to emit too much in order to protect the facility. So what's the way to right-size that? That's the interesting question. I put this in. This is just a meme I like. I threw it in at the last minute because I thought that it would also kind of belabor the point. But this is kind of a joke that's in we talk about in Shanghai a lot. That the typhoon seems to always, like, everyone freaks out when the typhoon's about to come, but it never really comes. It gets kind of diminished by Japan or by Taiwan or different parts of different land masses. So it just comes to Shanghai and knocks over a chair. This time something actually happened. It was 75 years kind of event. But we will rebuild. And in this case, if your city is so robust that a 50-year storm just knocks over a chair, you're very robust. And then if you can put that chair right back up, you're also very resilient kind of organization. So this is kind of a good example of what we should aim to strive for. So how do we start to specify? I think in the KLA talk they showed a lot about how they work with clean rooms, and there's a lot of very good kind of metrics and standards around how to define reliability for those spaces, and because they're highly controlled and they're doing high-value processes, very sensitive work. Here, how can we apply this across facilities more globally? So. We can look at some specifications for example, for power quality. That's something that is very critical for a lot of buildings as our equipment becomes more and more sensitive to the quality of the power delivered. So you can see here there are lots of different kinds of indicators around power quality in terms of frequency deviations, swells, flickers, et cetera. And all these things can be measured and quantified. So this is actually a standard of power quality delivered by the utility, right? So you can see here there's a very good reliability metric of plus or minus 1% deviation for 99.5% of the week in terms of the hertz delivered to your building. So that's a very nice example. But is this level of reliability like the right level for given your function of the facility? Maybe if you're a lab, right, and all your experiments depend on having the right level of voltage, then you would want to have some really high level of reliability here. But if you're an office space, then maybe you don't need to invest this much to have this level of reliability. So again, for financial and environmental sustainability, we want to avoid over-specifying here. Same thing with temperature, another global kind of parameter that you want to make sure is very reliable across your facilities. And you can see here, this is an example from the pharmaceutical company that has different kinds of temperature ranges across different types of spaces. And so it's space specific, but then it's not specific in the sense of what's the percent uptime that they require. And one doesn't need to be met, right? Does it need to be met at all times of day, or is it only at certain times of the day? So again, we want to avoid to say we need this 24/7. We want to avoid over-specifying. So here's kind of a framework that I put together for this talk about how can we avoid over-specifying our reliability requirements. So first, you want to determine the desired level of reliability based on your business requirements, right? So that's that percent uptime of performance within a specified range for each criteria for each type of space. And then you determine the scope of that reliability based on the current facility operation. So that largely depends on when are you using the space in terms of the people and the equipment. And then you can actually start to quantify the current reliability based on the desired level and the scope of your building based on very, very granular operating data. And that's where it gets really interesting. And you use that granular operating data to start to improve your reliability using predictive alarms and controls. And then finally, when you can do no more with the data, then that's when you start to do capital investment into that project to improve your reliability based on that kind of already very optimized data-driven baseline, investing in actual equipment upgrades. So this is kind of now that we've talked about how to define, specify reliability in a facility, how do we actually scope and then quantify it? So here's an example of using really granular operating data to scope and quantify reliability. So this is an example from a New York-based university with the satellite campus in Shanghai. And this is actually what we did with the data that we collected from our control system. And essentially, you can see that there's temperature, and temperature is in color, and then the occupancy is the dot. And you can see that as we play this data across time, you start to notice this whole kind of interesting life of the building. Like, why are people in there at 3 a.m.? And why are some rooms so cold with nobody sitting in there? And you start to see all these different patterns. And for this university, it was a real kind of value add to understand when they were using the building, because students, as we know at Stanford, like they're everywhere at all different kinds of time, studying or doing other things. So the university wanted to know, what is the scope that I want to keep my spaces at that performance spec, right? And they can only find out by understanding who was when there were people in the space. So by looking at that data, we first could see, okay, well, for the different types of rooms, when were people occupying them? And then we could look at, this is kind of across 24 hours in a day, looking averaged across the whole year. And we saw that, okay, we can actually kind of do a time box for the reliability. So that small meeting rooms, actually students are in there quite a lot of the time because they're studying at late at night. But a lot of the other large classrooms, small classrooms, those do not need to be patrolled or conditioned at a large kind of part of the day. Of course, labs are operated more 24/7, so those had reliability all around the clock. So you could see that there's savings in terms of kind of your operations and what kind of effort and investment you put into building by understanding those kind of usage patterns. And this can be done not just for occupancy, but also for equipment, for example. When are you running those experiments? And when do you need that really highly reliable power quality? So this is looking at that same building, and then looking at how did that data operate against this, did that meet your spec, right, during those operating hours? And those red areas are essentially where the reliability of the temperature was low. And we could see that in the large meeting rooms. Essentially, when people were there, it was much too hot 40% of the time. So then we can start to say, okay, this is where we are, and how can we improve upon that? So finally, the last step, which is in more of an exploratory phase for us at this point, is how do you, based on the data that we've collected, how do we find the right size of infrastructure investment that maximizes the return for the business, right? And that's really Melody's big question. And first of all, right, the first step is to measure, as I mentioned just now. And so we've developed a whole set of technologies for this specific purpose. We have a device that measures power quality at a very high level of detail at the sub-metering level. We also have a device that measures temperature, humidity, occupancy that's very accurate, and it's all on battery power. So these are essentially the key here is to make everything lightweight and wireless so that this can be done in an operational facility, right? You don't have to build a whole new system to set this up. And then then you take that data into a platform. So we have our cloud-based platform that analyzes the data and creates these predictive models for understanding when are these events going to trigger. Not that we will react to them after they trigger, right? So we understand when is, looking at the temperature trends, when is that going to exceed your SLA, right? In half an hour and 1 hour, and we can react before that. Same thing with power quality. When you're starting getting more of these flickers in power quality, so that you can start to do something before you get a power outage. So that's what we can do on the analytics level. And then by looking at the data and looking at and responding to those alarms, you can basically, every response is cost, right? But then if you're responding predictively, you're already lowering your cost per response or your cost per failure. So those can be essentially points in time where you respond proactively based on that predictive data you're getting from your sensors and your system. And then finally, only then do you start to look at investing capital into infrastructure improvements to increase the reliability, where you can look at, you understand exactly, this is my reliability currently, this is the cost that I incur by responding to these events. Over time, I have that data. Now, if I do invest further into infrastructure, how much can the cost of those responses and those failures be lowered? And you can really make a much more quantitative financial decision that way, right? So you can compare, for example, your internal rate of return against your WACC rate, and then make that decision with your CFO. So this is a framework that we've developed to help address this question of how to right-size infrastructure for the sake of reliability. Obviously, it changes. It's very flexible and dynamic and applies in different ways to different facilities. And this is a number of our case studies. So ranges from retail customers like Starbucks, a lot of luxury brands, as well as universities, malls, industrial projects, and these are some of our partners. So we work with big multinationals, facility management companies in particular, like JLL, a lot of system integrators, and ESCO companies, and a lot of major international brands. So that's where we are today, and we're really excited to kind of go into this new foray of adding new value in this arena of reliability and sustainability, and looking forward to your questions. So thank you.